We must believe that things end, things end at the right time. Things end, things end in due time. This time, it will be my time, yeah. In due time, in my time. I'm so glad that it's my time.
So let's go ahead and be transparent. See, that's probably not the best way to start this off, but I'm going to do it anyway because I can do whatever I want to do, period. but let's say something that actually I've been saying for maybe I wouldn't say 2 years. I've been saying faithfully for a year now. The steps you take today will lead to your tomorrow. I genuinely believe that. I'm in a very big season of faithfulness. Um, I'll get into it a little later in the conversation, but I do believe faithfulness and consistency are two different things. Um, Again, I'll explain later, but let me finish the sentiment, right? The steps you take today will lead to your tomorrow. You don't have to control the entire future. I think it is simply important that you faithfully steward what is in your hands right now. And so that I've got that out the way. What is up, you guys? Welcome to the BIYG podcast. I'm your host, Stefan. Believe in your growth. I must be more honest. I was intending to talk about why having too many good ideas could keep you from building anything great. But as I was answering prompts, because I want to have some structure in what I do, but I feel as if though it takes away some of the organic responses, or I don't know, the fluidity for me. And honestly, I'm just going to be real when it comes to answering certain questions. I don't know. I feel as if though my mind doesn't comprehend what was asked sometimes. Sometimes. And so I go off rail. And I think that is how this conversation came about, or this point, or this topic in itself came about. Because really, with the initial one, I was going to be, I guess, kind of touching on, the fact of, from most conversations, I speak from my experience. So that way there is some level of credibility and relatability. And I do have experience in you wanting to do farming, podcasting, singing, um, being creative, walking in purpose, starting a business, getting money, stewardship, all of that other stuff. And then recognizing it's like, is this assignment from the perspective of believers? Is this an assignment, or is this a good opportunity? Because not everything that glitters is gold, and not everything that is good is the right thing to do. And so I still may touch on, why having too many good ideas can keep you from building, but not right now, not today, I think. Um, it's okay to say no to something because it is not the season for it. There is a season for everything, and you have to steward even yourself adequately, properly. You're one human being. You don't have to run yourself into the ground trying to build an image or keep up with the image or whatever the case might be. You're one person. Enjoy your life, but be diligent. This is the last thing I'll say before I get into the conversation. When we say enjoy our lives, there are people out there who neglect diligence. They neglect the fact of work that you love, doing something that is actually valuable, and it gives something to the community. It builds the people around you up. It is of service. You want to be of service. You don't want to just be, oh, I want to take these trips and I want to go here, I want to go there. That's all nice and dandy, and all work and no play is no fun, and it does not make for a good life. But in the end, we were designed and given abilities, talents, skills, blessings, whatever you want to call it. And it is the intent that we give it to one another, that we give freely. But off of that, I don't know how long this is gonna be. I understand long form content does not have to be an hour long. So maybe with me intentionally typing out or writing down thoughts or answering questions, I can get to my points a little bit more, you know, concisely and not be so loquacious. um, yeah. So I guess let's just begin with the first question that I was asked and my response to it. So the question being, what have I personally learned about the cost of pursuing too many good things? Now, a little backstory to this. This question was a part of the first prompt. And so again, that goes into me sometimes I don't think comprehending what was being asked. But I have learned, and this is just something I want all of us to do, learn how to trust yourself, right? I think for believers and even non-believers, but for believers specifically, if God orders your steps, I think there are some times you might do the peculiar or the eclectic or weird thing, but that might be the right thing and it might take you down a direction that could be better if you just trust it and you're not so self not self-centered but insecure, don't be so unsure, just trust the process and go with it, but to answer that question, the cost of pursuing too many good things at once, what have I learned? For me, this was how my response went. Throughout the years, nothing gained my undivided attention, and I can be honest about that. Um, I again podcast, I sing, write poetry. I started gardening. There's a lot of things that I do, and I must, kind of pull out gardening from that because gardening actually has become the more stable thing in my life as of today. But I do recognize that I was giving so much, well, trying to give what I could to every little thing rather than pinpointing one thing and working it. Building first, because they say don't put all your eggs in one basket, but you got to first have a basket in order to diversify. You get what I'm saying? And then with the one thing you diversified, you can diversify it many other ways if you work it well. So that's just important, but again, that's not necessarily the point of the video. Let's continue, right? The specific reason I cannot say why, but as I am learning in my garden, the seeds you neglect will return back to the earth without producing what they were capable of producing. And to me, that is, I think, the potential, of all things in your life, but the stewardship behind it. Again, going back to it, undivided attention, my divided attention going to this and that and that and this, that nothing is being faithfully cared for in a way. It's like I'm there, but it's not faithful and it's not helpful, right? But again, you know, that didn't mean that the seeds were bad. That didn't mean that what I was planting did not have value or it wasn't packed full of goodness. It just was not being cared for in the way that could make it compound and exponentially grow and actually open doors for the other things that I do. And that goes back to the one basket. You need at least one basket so that you could put your eggs in multiple baskets. And so let's continue. We go into faithfulness over consistency. I'm very big on that. Um, Being faithful to something isn't about a schedule or routine, it's about support. What is necessary for today or this current exact moment, right? Whether relationship, whether finances, whether business, whether intellect, whatever it is, what is needed today, right? Living in this second, you know, being flexible but diligent in your work. I think you can, there's, and I told this story before and I kind of don't want to share it, but there's a person that I knew and his brother needed, was just in need of assistance because I think he had had surgery. And because the brother who should have helped his brother, quote unquote, should have, he had a schedule, he had a routine of going to the gym. And so he didn't want to lose his consistency by doing a good thing, if that makes sense. Like, and I think a lot of us were so rigid in it because I can't, there's nuance to it, but I don't know what has really happened to a lot of us where if we get thrown off, everything, it's like everything is shaky. Like we just lose momentum. And that's not everyone, but there are people who are like that, where if one little thing drops, the whole system fails. And that's not good. You know, it's not good to be like that. But that's why, to me, I think I don't want to be consistent because I don't want my consistency to be built upon, did I do this today? Did I do this at this exact hour? Am I, yeah, I want to be able to show up when necessary. And that doesn't sound, I think that sounds worse than it is, but we'll kind of clarify that a little bit later, what it means to show up when necessary. And especially, I guess, in the aspect of gardening, but I do feel as if though it can apply to every area of your life, knowing how to show up when necessary, right? But trust, right? Because after you've done your work and after you've been flexible and you've been diligent in it, you have to trust. That's another thing that I think in pursuing, from my mindset, pursuing too many good things, you know, what was the cost of it? The cost of finding me out, learning that I didn't trust God. I didn't trust the process. I didn't know there was a process, right? But you can only do what you can do. Everything else is up to time and chance, time and life, right? It says in Ecclesiastes, don't get me quoting the verse, I don't know, but life and chance happens to us all. Time and chance happens to us all. It might be time and life. Either way, it's two of them words. But I know time is one specifically because we are finite beings. And so we're here for a limited number of days, and it is wise to number your days and be urgent but not panicked, right? And this again, this is where I reiterate, the steps you take today will lead to your tomorrow. I think we ought to stop neglecting stewardship of our right now and be intentional about staying present, not trying to spread our spirits too thin, trying to be in a place that our physical body isn't. And I guess what I mean by that, you know, for me, the trust part, I share it a little later, but I guess a little peering into it. I guess throughout it was sometime last year, 2025, I began to envision so much of what it could be, that there was, because I was lacking in my physical being, that introduced or invited something to take place or come in to my life. And I know that sounds weird, so let me clean it up for you. In spirit, I was not present. My body was physically in the garden, but my spirit was somewhere else. And so that invited something to take the place of where my spirit should have been. Now, I'm not saying that, I don't know, it sounds weird, but I hope that what I'm conveying makes sense. You ought to be present, right? Focusing on tomorrow is only going to create, and not create, but invite anxiety, right? The word talks about, you know, tomorrow having its own worries, right? And so that is a real thing. It will have its own situation, its own circumstance, its own dilemma or successes that you can't steward right now because you don't even know what it may be, what it may persist of, but you are trying to be there, and maybe for good reasoning. Maybe you're in a hard situation, maybe you're just excited, maybe the vision is so grand, whatever, right? But it is important and it is imperative that we stay present, because in present there should be joy, there should be peace, there should be the understanding of, if I keep doing this good thing, something is going to happen. And hopefully it is good. But if I keep putting in good, I tend to think, because I'm optimistic and I'm a child of God, that good will come from it. It's not promised, but there's a high chance that if I do good, that good will come back. What you sow, you shall reap, right? And that's just what I believe. I know some people may not, but that's just to each their own. But I want to say, you can become so preoccupied with the vision of tomorrow that you neglect responsibilities of today. And again, I think one of the biggest responsibilities, duties that we have, is tending to our spirit, our mind, our body, our soul. And oftentimes you can't do that, so worried about what's going to happen here, how you're going to get this, and who you need to talk to get this done. And it's just, let the pieces fall into place. Let your work for you. Let what you have done, and let God be involved. Let what you do what it is supposed to do, and let God do what he can do, right? Um I think, again, just to even bring that into some of my personal experiences about being preoccupied with vision, I say you can be working in the garden while thinking about your future business. That's not really being present. I mean, granted, it's good to have a vision, it's good to have a desire for your future, but again, let the steps that you take today lead to your tomorrow. You can be recording a podcast while worrying about where your career is going. You can be praying about the next season while neglecting the current one, which is kind of crazy, when you think about that. But you can also be imagining a finished harvest while failing to tend to today's plants. And especially, I think, in that last one, you honestly get to see what happens once, you know, you drop the ball on what is required to today. That vision becomes not, it fades into the background, or in just into thin air, because you neglected the work, you neglected the in between, what it took from the beginning to the end. And honestly, that's one thing that I've been, ever since I was young, I was asking God about, like, the in between. What what is that? And I don't know if I heard it from someone or how the question was prompted in my spirit, but I always wanted to know what that looked like, what the in between was. And now that I'm older and I'm aging, hopefully even to see more days, I thank God that I get to see the in between and the blessing in it, because I do believe that is where you learn a lot. You learn a lot, but one of the greatest things you learn is enjoying your life. You know, I mean, that if the vision is going to come, it's going to come. If the manifestation of it is going to transpire, it's going to be what it's going to be. But before that happens, you still have to live. You still have to live. And I don't know. I don't want anyone worried and shaken and living in a place where you honestly don't have trust that it's going to transpire, you know? But I do think that the glimpse of the vision is supposed to give you courage to run. It's the fixation that drags you into comparison and anxiety about the when, the where, the why, and the how. And so I think it's important to also, for those who may not know, a farmer doesn't say, I watered Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and so I'm done, right? This is where we're talking about consistency, right? That is consistent. Someone who does something at a set time, And that's even discipline in a way. And I'm not saying that faithfulness doesn't involve faithful discipline and consistency, because it does, right? But this is what needs to happen for anyone who gardens or farms, right? When you're dealing with life, when you're dealing with things that live, and I mean, even inanimate objects, your writing doesn't live, but it's the essence of you, right? But the farmer looks at the soil, the farmer looks at the weather, the farmer looks at the plant, and then asks, what does living things require today, right now? What do these living things need from me in this moment? Right? I've said this before and I stand by it, and I'm glad I was able to see it. When plants are waterlogged, they respond differently. And if they stay like that for a while, they can die. You know, you increase the chances of disease and pest and all of this other stuff attacking the plant when you're not attentive, you're not looking and aware and understanding what is necessary for right now, right? And I think living like that every day in every situation, what is required for this moment, it's a powerful framework for life, I think. It's about the relationship that we all have with time, right? Um, and I guess to explain that, again, going back to it, the steps you take today will lead to your tomorrow. Um, I guess that's a little it's outside, it's not really outside of consistency, but the faithfulness of it all and the relationship that we have with time is, you can't rush it and you can't slow it down. But everything has this appointed time. And it's easier, I think, to talk about seeds and plants and nature, because science has done an amazing job at helping us, those who run these scientific methods and these experiments, to figure out things so that they can pass the knowledge down. We know when a certain seed or a certain plant or a certain thing is going to produce, right? But there's areas of our lives where we don't have an expiration date. We don't have a maturity date. We don't have that, you know? And so, again, that's the in between, but that's also the relationship that we have with time and the trust that is necessary for even that, right? And so, let's just move on into the next area, right? I was prompted, to share 2 to 4 concrete stories, where I neglected something, what happened, and what the garden taught me. And so, fair warning, they weren't really stories of neglect. I probably only had one moment where I neglected something, but these stories for me were about the fixation. Um, and I think this is helpful for a lot of people today because of what we go through, and people's need to control things, or need to understand, or need to be ahead or whatever, right? Not be behind, or whatever, right? But I do think that it would help, right? So when I first started, and sometime last year, like I told a part of this story already, but when I first started, I think maybe about, it was either 3 years ago. I started 4 years ago, but I think this moment occurred 3 years in. Well, no, not 3 years in, but on the third year. I'm sorry. And so I remember a time where I would go outside and I was checking, literally, I would check the seeds. I would check where I just planted these plants, or put these seeds in the soil like 10 times a day, you know, um, as if anything important would have happened in the last 24 hours, or less than 24 hours, right? Um, I was wanting evidence that something was happening. And I think that's a lot of us, we want to feel like our work is paying off, or it's not in vain, or whatever nuance, whatever reason that we can come up with. That's valid. Is valid. We are in a time today where, it's, again, you got to know. when to chase and you got to know when to let go. And I think that's one of the things too. Nobody wants to waste time. You know, that's a part of the numbering your days, right? Knowing when something is not um working out and knowing when something is not for you. And so I kind of get that, but I think I still must be transparent because even in this moment for me, it wasn't about that. It was about the the anxiousness, but also the excitement of it, but not recognizing and or realizing that things require a process. Most things in life require a process. And so I didn't trust the process or believe that there would be one, you know. And again, I know that many people struggle with that. But eventually over time, you know, I got acquainted with some things in life, and most things in life take time. There's the in between, and we don't really get to see, you know, in a highlight reel society, that in between, but it's still there regardless if it's broadcasted or not, you know. And I use this analogy: before the vacation, people have to travel. Before the travel, people have to pack. And before the packing, people have to plan. And before the planning, people have to desire. And so we must insist on taking the steps and enjoying the process to get the end result. You know, I tie that back to me. I started out, you know, is anything happening? Right. That's the mindset, the stance that I have. Is anything happening? You know? And then as time progressed and as experience took place, I can see where this is going. But the irony in that, the vision created another temptation. And this goes to the second part of the story that I told earlier, a bit of it. Um, you know, I wanted what I was doing to succeed. It seemed like over the last 4 years, I've grown, um, I think significantly, producing more, having more space, more things. And I just feel a natural grace, a natural, um, I don't know, you know, just movement. There's movement in it. And so naturally, I do believe God gave me vision for it. And that's good. That's beautiful. But it became something that divided me from the right now. Like in Malachi, I think it's Malachi, Lord, forgive me if I don't know. But he was supposed to write the vision and make it plain so that he who sees it can run with it, right? And so I'm getting ahead of myself, but it was just provoking. It was a provocation, you know, for me to linger in the vision. And that created again an absence of mind or whatever that invited anxiety into the situation, provoking me to worry about factors that weren't even workable today. I neglected my joy in the moment, which I think is so important. I think it's so important. If you're doing anything, do it as unto the glory of God. Do it fully. If you're gonna be helping someone, help them. Be there. Don't be thinking about what you're gonna cook when you get home. If you're doing anything, planting a plant, look at that plant. Understand that plant. Be thankful for that plant. And I mean, I just intentionally deciding to be present, right? And I guess in a lot of other ways, you know, I did neglect my garden physically, but it wasn't. I don't think it was substantial enough to really share it for this moment. But I can just be vulnerable and say I took some people's advice that discouraged me, and you know, I'm learning again to trust myself. I'm learning to trust how God made me and the judgments that I have. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who aren't wise or educated or intelligent enough to lead me, but I think some people are so far removed from certain things that they're just speaking, and you have to be able to discern who knows what they're talking about and who's just saying something. And one thing about it is, sadly, when you take some people's advice, life is a risk. and you risk wasting a little time, or you risk reaping the reward for listening to them. And so life is all about risk. And I don't want to get bent out of shape or listening to someone who didn't know what they were talking about, or ignoring someone who knew. And I mean, I just, you got to be okay with the decisions you have made at the end of this life. And I know that's another conversation, but going back to the point, for me, which again I believe is one of the biggest issues that we have in society, is the fixation on the future. And that showed up for me constantly checking the seed because I didn't trust the process, or even realize that I think maybe subconsciously I knew there was a process, because you read the packet and it says 3 months, it says 270, 180, or 45 days, right? It gives you an idea. Again, that thank you for the researchers and those who come before me that have done the work, right? We're thankful for them, and we hope that we can leave something valuable for those who come after us. But then also, I was preoccupied with the future, seeing the vision so vividly that I began worrying about circumstances that could not be addressed yet. And that, to me, that is where I felt like I was being chastised, or, and in a loving way, but forsaking my stewardship, because you are important. Your health is important. Your hope is important. And one thing that can cause your hope to take a hit is when anxiety creeps in. And it's like it didn't have to, but because you're so, you're not faithful with the small thing. And this is not to beat anybody up or even beat myself up. It's important to be faithful with the small thing. Every step you take to be there fully, right? I say this, there's faithfulness in watering, and we're sticking with gardening because I think that's just one of my strongest, I guess, uh, topic or things right now. That's just where I know something, a little bit of something. But you got to be faithful in watering, and sometimes there's faithfulness in leaving the plant alone. Sometimes there's faithfulness in pruning it. Sometimes there's faithfulness in harvesting. Sometimes it's the research, and sometimes it's the rest. Sometimes it's recognizing that there's nothing productive for you to do yet. And so faithfulness again, and I know I was saying sometimes it's faithfulness in, but what I meant was sometimes faithfulness is watering, leaving the plant alone, pruning, harvesting, researching, resting, or doing nothing, right? And that is because again, the farmer has to look at everything in totality to make the decision of what needs to be done to this specific thing today, because if you do much more than required, you can cause the plant to get sick. If you do nothing, you can cause the plant to regress, die, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And we don't want that. We want to give the best of what we can to every little thing in our life. And so, you know, that brings me, I guess, kind of to the end of this, to, I guess, really give the whole point and what the topic is about. Stop neglecting the stewardship of your right now. Faithfulness over consistency. Um, what final words could I have to say? you know, and as days go by, I'm gonna get more into, I guess, conversations regarding people who feel, I mentioned this a little earlier, people who feel like they're behind, or people who are in comparison mode, or whatever. I'm gonna cover some of that stuff, I think. And again, it's gonna be under the guise of what I've learned in my garden, because I just feel as if though nature has taught me so much, you know indirectly and directly, regarding life. um and I'm happy about it, and I want to share that with other people. I want us to be able to be present, you know, give our all to the things that we actually decide to invest in, that we even have an idea about. First start, let the idea come, And then once the idea comes, make a plan to get it started, to execute it. Then once you do that, decide to be consistent, disciplined, and faithful. I really genuinely do like the word faithful over all the other two words. I do. Again, there's a flexibility in faithfulness that it says again, whatever is required for this moment, I'm going to do it. Versus I have to do this every day. I have to do this at this specific time because you never know, variables can change, right? And I think that's just the beauty of it for me. And that's probably, I think, one of the many things that I'm learning about myself is I never really struggled with consistency. I was always trying to be faithful to the design in which God made me. And sometimes that's going to look odd to other people. It's going to look as if though you're out of season or you're trying to be different, but in reality, you're trying to honor your makeup. You're trying to not self erase yourself. And I know I just said you're in self a lot, I guess. Anyway, you're trying not to forget who you are. You're trying to honor your individuality because you were made individual for a reason. And that requires faithfulness. That requires you to acknowledge every bit of you, every part of you, and bring it to the table, every day. Bring it to the table every day, whatever that may look like for that day, because I don't feel the same way every day. And that's okay. I'm human. We are human. But let me wrap this up. It's been 36 minutes. And again, I'm understanding long form content does not have to be hours and hours long. But I do believe the point has been communicated. I have shared, I think, what was on my heart. Um, again, transparency. Some of this stuff was written down, and I'm glad it is because I want to make the points and I want to make the points cleanly and not be garrulous, you know, not just talking and talking and talking and making the same point over and over and over and over again. But even though in videos like this, I do think you want to make the same point over and over and over again. And you just want to do it in different ways. But maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I'm learning. But this is my talk style. So we'll see. Maybe I'll evolve and come out of it. But yeah. Yeah. Um, I think that's it. I think that is it. Um, Again, the steps you take today will lead to your tomorrow. You don't have to control the entire future. You simply just have to be faithfully stewarding what is in your hands right now. And so, with all that being said, remember to stay positive. Keep that with you. Spread it wherever you go. My name is Stefan. If you didn't know, with all that being said, love yourselves and love others. I feel like I said with all that being said twice. I did. Have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Be safe. You are love.